and leaned down cautiously to kiss her forehead. She smiled at me as I leaned back, and I was somewhat reassured because it seemed real, so I led her to the Porsche, where Brandon and Jazz were waiting. We split after that, getting into our two cars without another word and going home for the weekend. When I got home, I was so fucking thankful that FanMade had practice, because I just knew he was going to drill me about all that shit. But before I could even go up the stairs to my bedroom and relax, someone knocked on the door. I groaned and turned around on the stairs, walking down and throwing the door open angrily. And, of course, it just made fucking sense that Brandon would be standing on my doorstep fucking glaring at me with her arms crossed over her chest. What? I snapped, not feeling particularly up to her bullshit at that moment. Instead of answering me, she ducked under my arm, walking into the house like she fucking owned the place. With a frustrated growl, I closed the door hard, just so she knew she really wasn't welcome. Not that she cared, as she bounced to the living room and flopped onto the couch, leaning back and looking entirely too fucking comfortable. I quirked an eyebrow at her, just wanting her to get it over with. She rolled her eyes at me.
Oh, relax, I'm not here to castrate you or anything.
She teased with a smile as she ran her finger down the arm of the couch. I huffed and walked to the nearest chair, flopping down and looking bored as fuck. Which was a total bluff, because the gleam in her eye when she said the word was scary as hell. She pursed her lips at me for a moment, as her expression turned serious.
My cousin loves you, you know?
She whispered quietly, clasping her hands in her lap. I was pleased the words came out of her mouth quietly and calmly, so I nodded at her. I knew she loved me. I love her too. I shrugged in honesty, feeling a little fucking offended when Brandon got all wide-eyed and shocked at the words coming out of my mouth. I rolled my eyes. Not that it's any of your fucking business, or anything, I muttered, shaking my head and glaring at my boots. Brandon's lips remained pursed for a moment as she tilted her head at me.
And you make her happy,
she said, as a statement, and in an awestruck tone that was just further fucking offensive. I rolled my eyes again and nodded. I like to think I made my girl happy. She nodded, bobbing her little head and looking around the room before sitting up straight on the edge of the couch and looking me right in the eye.
Here's what you're going to do, Edward,
she chirped with a smile and a tone that just fucking dripped condescension.
You're going to come over tomorrow night for dinner. Meet as me officially as her boyfriend,
she said in a matter-of-fact voice, with a smug expression. Like if I didn't, there would be hell to pay. She stood up then, rocking on her heels.
You're going to be polite, and you're going to bring Bella flowers.
She nodded decisively, and I kind of fucking gaped at her. It was a little pretentious for her to be telling me how to treat my own girlfriend. Instead of explaining herself, she smiled at me sweetly and skipped towards the door, throwing a wave over her shoulder.
See you tomorrow at 5.
She sang, as she exited the house, leaving me in the chair, raking my fingers through my hair in utter frustration. Fucking bitch. Emmett eventually cornered me in the hall that evening. I just gave him the now perfunctory "yes she's my girlfriend, no I'm not fucking her" speech, and locked myself in my room before he could question me any further about it. I flopped on my back onto my bed, ridiculously happy to be away from everyone. I didn't know how my girl could handle so much fucking attention all the time. Everyone always staring at her and waiting for her to do something weird. I was fucking exhausted after only one day of it. I was waiting for her when she came at 10, hungry and wanting to question her about Jim. And kind of fucking ready to shove my foot up an ass, if need be. When I heard her tap on the door, I opened it hastily, leading her in out of the cold while I slit her hood down. She turned to me with a smile that eased my fears as I leaned down to kiss her softly, cupping her cheek and rubbing it with my thumb the way she liked. She sighed and tangled her fingers into my hair, pulling me closer and trying to deepen it the way she always did. I sighed back, taking her tongue into my mouth and massaging it slowly with my own. I ended it quickly, in an attempt to make our night more comfortable. We did have a pretty long fucking day. She sighed and turned back around without looking me in the eye and unloaded my meal onto the bed. I furrowed my brows at her weird sigh and followed her, flopping onto the bed and inspecting her expression carefully as she removed her hoodie and climbed up beside me. I began eating the fucking delicious teriyaki stir-fry while she leaned against my shoulder silently, just waiting for the right moment to ask her what the fuck was bothering her. I studied her expression as I ate, looking for any signs of distress or discomfort. "What kind of cookies did you make tonight?" I asked casually, while I chewed the stir-fry. She shrugged against my shoulder.
"German chocolate Inferiors,"
she responded quietly without looking up at me. I furrowed my brows at the beef and vegetables in my container, trying to figure out what the fuck made my girl feel inferior. Eventually I was fed up. I covered the container and turned towards her. "Okay, tell me what the fuck happened in gym today." I sighed, putting my fork down. I watched as she grimaced, falling onto her back and covering her face with her hands.
"It's stupid,"
she mumbled through her hands. "Bullshit," I said simply. And it was. "Nothing that bothers you is stupid," I told her, watching as she peeked through two fingers at me. She slowly slid her hands off her face with a deep sigh. And she was fucking blushing. I furrowed my brows at her red face. The same thing was bothering her, was making her blush. "That's new." I quirked an eyebrow at her lying before me on the bed. She grimaced again, slowly lifting herself to a sitting position in front of me and eyeing me carefully.
"It's really none of my business, or my place to ask,"
she replied quietly, pulling at her long sweater sleeves and gazing into my eyes with a look of caution. I frowned at her, watching as she picked at her sleeves in a way I knew all too well. "You can ask me anything," I whispered coaxingly, and kind of fucking hurt that she even had to think twice. She didn't ask me anything though, just whispered two words into her lap.
"Lauren Mallory."
I blinked at her a few times, just wondering who I had to kill for even telling her about that. But really, I should have told her myself. I was always fucking priding myself on how honest we were with each other, and I just so happened to let that little piece of information slide by unmentioned. So instead, I grimaced. "Oh," I answered lamely, not denying it, like I really wanted to. She peeked up at me with the red face.
"It doesn't matter to me, or anything,"
she whispered in a sad tone that was completely fucking unconvincing. She pulled her sleeves harder, still glancing up at me cautiously as I grimaced and nodded in confirmation with a sour expression. Her face fell a little before she was able to catch herself and smile at me reassuringly. Not that it was the least bit reassuring. I sighed deeply and raked my fingers through my hair. "If I could change all that shit I would," I muttered without meeting her gaze. It was probably the first time I felt ashamed for fucking Mallory. It was really no big deal to me. It wasn't romantic or any shit like that. It was barely intimate at all. When I finally met her gaze again, she was staring at me, biting her lip, and still pulling at her sleeves nervously. So that wasn't all. I sighed again, and quirked an eyebrow at her expectantly. Might as well get it all out there in the open. She darted her eyes around the room nervously, avoiding my gaze.
"Are there more?"
she asked in a tiny whisper I had to fucking struggle to hear. I breathed a sigh of relief at the only question I could answer right. "No," I answered honestly. She looked relieved by my answer as she finally met my gaze, still beat fucking red. I attempted to smile at her, still feeling a little ashamed. "That shit really doesn't bother you?" I asked skeptically. And of course I was fucking skeptical, because if it were her, that shit would bother me a lot. She shook her head.
"No, that doesn't bother me,"
she replied quietly before looking back down at her lap, still pulling her sleeves.
"It's just..."
She trailed off with a sigh, finally ceasing her pulling of her sleeves and looking me in the eye.
"I'm not like those girls,"
she whispered with a sad expression. And I couldn't figure out why that would make her sad. Who wanted to be a skanky bitch? She must have noticed my obviously confused expression, because she huffed at me, rolling her eyes.
"It's stupid, I already told you,"
she muttered, shaking her head in a way that indicated she didn't want to continue with her line of thought. I was getting impatient. Just fucking spit it out, Bella.